being here with us today. Just a couple things. My name is Clarissa. I work here at the graduate school. And today we have the most wonderful speaker of all time who has heated seats in his car, Mr. John Shaffer. He is the Associate Director at the graduate school. And today he will be giving a presentation in public speaking. We like to reiterate what Lily said, we ask that you hold all questions until the end. And at that time, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself, turn on your camera, or just pop a question in the chat. And for those of you with phones, if we have time, we play a little Kahoot game over some trivia after the Q&A session. And by that time, the top 3 winners will get a prize. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to John.
Thanks, Clarissa. Hey, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us for the Public Speaking 101. Just to kind of kick things off, a little bit about me and how public speaking kind of ties in with me personally and professionally. So this is my Public Speaking 411. And yes, that is me in the picture. That is probably 5 or 6 years old. I love Superman, so that's an aside. So just to kind of give you some context, and first of all, I am by nature and growing up very shy and introverted, which you may not think goes hand in hand with being an effective or seasoned or experienced public speaker. But what has happened to me over my professional life is a lot of practice in public speaking, and which has gained me experience. And I actually have 33 years of professional public speaking experience. And public speaking, you know, in general is in any venue. So if you speak in class, right, in any of your classes, that's considered public speaking. You're speaking in front of an audience, in front of a group. I started actually as a teacher. So at the age of about 17, and then you can do the math and calculate how old I am. I didn't plan that very well. So I started about 17. I was a swim teacher. So I started teaching swim lessons for the American Red Cross, and then I was teaching first aid and CPR for the American Red Cross. So that started gaining me experience. But when I first started, when I was younger and I would have to get up and give a presentation, I would get very nervous and my heart would race and I'd get flushed and I'd sweat and I'd stumble over my words and I would, at times my voice would crack. So all that stuff. So it's not abnormal for that to happen. And what I'm going to do now before I continue, I want to launch this poll and have you all take this poll. So there's 3 questions and you can just answer them, and then we're going to look at the results before I continue. So the poll's been launched. Oh, you are logged in from another. Let me try that again. Okay, something's going on with it's not letting me launch the poll for some reason. So we can actually put this into the chat. So who has any type of slight fear of oh, you got, okay, people did get the poll.
Yeah, I can see it on my end, John.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you guys can take the poll. For some reason though, I don't think I can view it. That's the problem. Let me see. Yeah, you got the poll, but I can't view the results. So
I can go ahead and read them off to you if you'd like.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the first one, public speaking makes me nervous. We got about 9 votes, and 56% all the time, 44% sometimes, and then 0 for the other ones.
Okay, cool. So my point is for asking some of those questions is the public speaking piece and the nerves that you get with public speaking, whether it be slight nerves or intense nerves, It's all normal. And ultimately, public speaking is a learned skill. So all it takes is practice to overcome that level of anxiety. So now, and over the 33 years, I have presented to audiences of 5, all the way up to 500, sometimes more. I've done these presentations in person, in a large auditorium. I have done them virtually, and I have been live on YouTube for some university sessions. So any of these venues, and my feeling is, and with my experience, is that honestly, it doesn't matter whether you're speaking in front of 5 or 500. The fact is just getting experience and feeling comfortable. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to overcome any level of public speaking anxiety? And anxiety is not necessarily debilitating. Sometimes it is, but this again could be anywhere from, if you're looking at an anxiety level 1 to 10, this could be, okay, well, I have a slight anxiety, or I have a large anxiety about getting up in front of people to give any type of public speech. So there's a couple things you can do. The first one that I have is more geared towards if you're presenting at a conference, which some of you may be why you're taking the session. So first of all, you want to be familiar with the room. What I have found, and I do this when I go to conferences or when I'm presenting at conferences, is that I like to know where I'm presenting, what the layout looks like, because then what I can do is, if you go down to number 5, visualize yourself speaking. You can visualize yourself speaking in the space. Part of public speaking and part of that anxiety is the fear of the unknown. And if you can get rid of that unknown, the fear of that unknown, you're going to reduce that anxiety level, because you kind of know what to expect. You know what the room's going to look like. You know where you're going to be. You know where you're going to be standing. You know what the technology is. So all that is going to kind of reduce some anxiety and help you relax a little bit. Obviously, you're gearing your presentation or your speech to your audience. So you definitely want to know who that audience is going to be. I don't think we're oftentimes ever in a situation where we don't know the audience. So we're always going to be prepared. Are we speaking to peers? Are we speaking to classmates? Are we speaking to stakeholders, decision makers? So depending on who your audience is will depend on how you tailor whatever presentation or public speech you're giving. Obviously, one of the biggest factors to lessen anxiety is making sure you're comfortable with the information that you're presenting over. So if you are giving a presentation, whether it be in class or in a conference, you're obviously not going to wait until the day before to either put it together or to practice. This is something you need to be very comfortable with. You need to be comfortable with the material, so that when you're looking at whatever whether you're looking at your notes, whether you're looking at a PowerPoint slide, is that you want to be comfortable with the material enough where you can look at a bullet point, look at some key points, be able to talk. What I like to say, you want to talk organically, not robotically. Talk organically about the content, and you want to be able to make sure that you look like it's more conversational. It's less like you're reading, but you want to be comfortable with the material enough where, again, you can glance and just talk organically about the information that you're wanting to cover. Learning how to relax is, I think, easier for some than others. You have to know what allows you to relax. So is that you like to listen to music, so maybe you have your earbuds in prior to your presentation. You maybe have some mantras that you say. Maybe there's some type of yoga, meditation, maybe like going for a walk. However you like to relax, whatever relaxes you, try to incorporate that prior to the presentation, so that you go into the presentation just at ease and ready to start talking. one of the biggest things and one of the biggest fears with public speaking is that you're afraid what other people are going to think. I think there's a fear that you feel that people are just waiting for you to fail. What people are waiting for you to fall flat on your face while you're up in front of a group. And that cannot be further from the truth. People ultimately want you to succeed. They want you to be the best you can be successful, because ultimately, think about it. There are people that are listening to you and they're wanting to get something out of whatever you're talking about. They're not there just simply to see someone give a speech. They're there for information. So they want you to be successful. They're rooting for you. We've all been there. You know, we've all been up in front of a group and been nervous about it. But they're not waiting for you to fall flat on your face. Everybody in the room is behind you 100%. Never, 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 never apologize for being nervous. How many times have you been in a presentation where the person starts off right at the beginning, the first thing they say, and you may have said this, is bear with me, or I apologize, I'm very nervous. So right then, you have not only set the tone for yourself for the presentation, but you set the tone for the audience. So what are they waiting for? They're waiting for a train wreck. And now you can feel and see, you can see the body language, you can feel kind of the energy of the room, maybe a little bit tense, because at this point, they're nervous for you. You're nervous because you set those expectations. Never, never apologize for being nervous. You want to make sure you concentrate on the message. I have seen this many times where if you are not a seasoned speaker and maybe you're talking about some topic and you decide to maybe share some anecdotal information, and suddenly you're sharing this anecdotal information and you are going further and further and further from the core topic, and you get out so far into right field that then you forget what you're supposed to be talking about next. You've gotten so far out there, you don't know how to get back. So if you are not a seasoned presenter, you're still on your way. You want to make sure you stick to the topic, you stick to the message, the content. Do not veer off of it. Make sure you stay on it. And then obviously, as I mentioned, practice makes perfect, and you need to gain experience. The only way you're going to improve, the only way that anxiety levels are going to decrease each time you have to give a presentation is if you provide opportunities for yourself. Opportunities may be seen about setting up a brown bag lunch and learn to give yourself practice presenting your research. You can do that sometimes through your department. You can join things like Toastmasters. There's a Toastmasters, I believe, in San Antonio, and that will give you practice. Obviously, putting your name in to present at conferences, and that may be anywhere from a poster presentation to presenting over a paper, a chapter, etc. But you need to give yourself those opportunities for experience. And then finally, this is one of my go-tos, I think, especially early on, and I learned to do this, is how to turn nervousness into positive energy. So you have nervousness is negative energy. Nervousness is, or can be perceived as negative energy. So nervousness is anxiety, it's stress. But anxiety and stress in situations also produce adrenaline. So that's where like your heart starts racing, maybe you get a little flushed. But adrenaline is adrenaline, period. And if you can learn how to harness the negative energy and take control of that, you want to control the negative energy. You don't want to let it control you. And you take that negative, that anxiety, that stress, and you kind of turn it on its ear and you harness it and you turn it into positive energy, you're going to be able to ride that wave of adrenaline while you're presenting. You just need to know how to grab it. And there's no way for me to say, oh, well, you actually reach in and you do this. It's really just up here and being comfortable enough to take that energy and kind of push it out to the audience. So again, all of this is through experience. So now that we've kind of gone through the whole the anxiety piece, when you are starting your presentation and you're walking up onto either the front of the class or front of the room at a conference or wherever you're speaking virtually, first impressions are going to be very important. And you want to make sure, first of all, that you look confident when you walk out there. Take that deep breath, harness that energy, know that you're going to own the room, and you walk out there and you look confident. You may not totally feel confident, but you look confident. You always want to start off with a bang. You really can't take time to warm up. Normally, in public speaking situations, like for example, at a conference, many times you're speaking for 10 to 20 minutes. If you're doing an in-class presentation, sometimes you're speaking maybe 5 minutes. If you're participating in the graduate school's 3-minute thesis presentation competition, you're doing it in 3 minutes. So you, in a situation where you're presenting, you really can't take time to warm up, because you're going to lose the audience and you're never really going to get your presentation off the ground. You always want to start off with a bang, however that is defined by you. Sometimes it's simply introducing yourself. Sometimes it's asking a rhetorical question of the audience. However you feel that you're going to start your presentation off with a bang, that's what you do. But you don't want to take time to warm up. You're just going to launch right into the presentation. Don't start off with being a little nervous and, kind of, not looking into your audience. It's really at the very beginning. Take ownership of the room, take ownership of the space, take ownership of the presentation, and go for it. You always want to speak clearly and confidently, and obviously you're going to look confident. You want to speak confident. And how you speak confident and how you speak clearly is you're going to speak as if you believe, because you should. Oftentimes as a graduate student, you're speaking over your research. In a professional setting, you're speaking over a topic that normally you're most likely a subject matter expert in. So speak as if you believe. And like I said, you should believe. You want to sound interesting and interested. You want to sound interesting in the way you present and interested in the material. Because let's be honest, if you're not interested in what you're presenting over, why is anybody that's listening to you, why should they be interested? And always remember that you are the expert. No matter the topic, people are there to listen to what you have to say over a certain topic. Today, I'm the expert and I'm talking about public speaking, but you need to own that. You need to own that you are the expert. Speak as if you know all of these things, looking confident, feeling confident, speaking confidently, all of these things, believing in your subject matter, believing and knowing that you're the expert. All these things are also going to reduce your levels of anxiety. So you really need to take ownership of everything. You need to take ownership of the topic, of what you're presenting over, of the room, of the space, of the audience is really what you're doing. So you want, and of yourself, you're taking control of yourself. So all these things are going to help you reduce any level of public speaking anxiety. Going right along with first impressions being important, you obviously want to build a rapport with your audience. There are many ways to do this, but it all depends on the amount of time you have. If you have time and you have a smaller group, you can go through and have each member of the audience introduce themselves. What are they looking to get out of the presentation? And kind of have it start a conversation like that. Sometimes building a rapport is simply saying, hey, this is me. This is who I am. this is the topic I'm presenting over, and this is why I'm presenting over this topic. Sometimes that's building a rapport. Again, going back to sometimes it's asking a rhetorical question, or maybe actually asking a question of the audience to answer. For example, I gave you those poll questions, which didn't go as well as I thought, but as I had hoped. But those are all ways to build rapport with your audience. You obviously, throughout the presentation, engaging your audience, maybe occasionally stopping to ask questions, kind of creating some form of conversation. Much easier to do in person than it is virtually. Virtually, you have to create exercises and, like for example, the polls, and have people be consistently typing into the Q&A or the chat function. You have to get creative, a little bit more creative, while you're engaging your audience in a virtual setting. In person, it's a little easier because you're right there and you're in the same room with them. Obviously, another opportunity is stopping periodically through your presentation, asking your audience if they have any questions over what you just presented over, stuff like that. So those are ways to engage your audience. Always, always, always make eye contact. This, of course, goes back to more of an in-person piece, but we are doing more and more in-person sessions. Synchronous virtual, like this doesn't really count because I can't really make eye contact with any of you simply because I'm looking at a camera right now versus individual people. So, but when you are in a group and you do want to make eye contact, engage is another way to engage the audience. And you want to make sure, sometimes if you're a little nervous or people are a little nervous, they'll focus in on one person. Usually it's someone in the front row. If this this may resonate with some of you, is that you're focusing on one person in the first row because you're nervous. And for whatever reason, nervousness creates this kind of like we don't want to be vulnerable. And because if we become vulnerable, then for some reason that equates to possibly increased opportunities for failure. But the two really should not coincide at all. If you provide yourself a little bit more vulnerability and you kind of engage your audience by visually trying to hit every single one of them, you're engaging your audience. How do you do this? Again, it takes practice. You may start by simply turning your head occasionally or moving your body, that it looks like you're kind of looking over the entire room, when in actuality, you're not making necessarily eye contact with an individual person. It's as audiences get larger, it becomes more difficult to do. Obviously, for example, if you've been to graduate school orientation and in person, we have anywhere from 200 to 500 people. It is impossible to make eye contact with every single person when you have hundreds of people in the room. Heck, even if you have 50, 20 is probably you can, but you get any more than that, it gets really difficult. So again, you kind of peruse, in that case, you peruse over the room. You're making sure that each section of the room, that they feel involved in what you're saying, that they feel like you're not ignoring them. Because if you focus in on one person, you're blocking out every other person in that room, and people feel suddenly disjointed from the presentation and from you as a speaker. I highly encourage you in any situation, whether it be a competition, whether it be a poster presentation, whether it be an oral presentation, is do not read from your notes. Do not. You can have them as kind of a backup where you have key concepts that you're covering. If it's broken down by, like, for example, this is a PowerPoint slide. If it's broken down by, you have notes for slide 1, slide 2, and you have key points. But again, going back to what I stated earlier, which is you want to be able to communicate this information organically. You do not want to read to them. They are not, if they wanted to read a book, they would have stayed at home. They're wanting to listen to you talk about the subject matter. Talk being the operative word. not read, talk. So you can have notes with key phrases, key concepts, whatever, but do not have paragraphs written, do not even have complete sentences written, because once you have a complete sentence or a paragraph, you are going to read it, period. You are going to have your paper up in front of you, and you are going to start reading your presentation. Don't do that. Appropriate humor. So what do I mean by appropriate humor? This is obviously, you're not in a stand-up comedy routine. You're not there to, talk about, why did the chicken cross the road? My nephew is 7 years old, and those are some of his favorite jokes because he's that age. But this isn't, you're not telling jokes. That's not what I mean by appropriate humor. Appropriate humor is being able to relay information in an everyday humorous way. So, if you are someone that people consider funny, if that's just simply part of your personality and how you deliver information tends to be funny, if you can, again, relate the information anecdotally to something that is humorous, then add that. I think it allows you to be a true version of yourself up in front of an audience, allows you to be a little bit more vulnerable. And if you can get a laugh out of people, then you're hitting the right notes as far as continuing to engage your audience. But I know people that just, I don't know, maybe just aren't everyday humorous. That's the best way I can put it. They're not just everyday funny. And so you don't want to force it. You don't want to force humor into a presentation just because, oh, John in Public Speaking 101 said to add appropriate humor. If you're not someone that can deliver humor, and if that's not you, then don't do it. Again, true version of yourself. What is the truest version of you when you're presenting? Body language and bad habits. This is, to me, mind-blowing, but you have to always consider when you're presenting is that everything communicates. And we talk about everything, we're primarily talking about body language. 55% of what you're communicating comes through your body language. 38% is the tone of the message, and only 7% is actually the content. So you have to not only know what you're saying, you have to make sure that the tone is on target and that you're showing the correct body language. This means try not to hide behind the podium. Try not to hide behind your notes. Make sure to stand or walk or move about. This goes back to also looking confident, standing up straight, making sure not, which we'll talk about nervous habits in a minute, but making sure that you're not doing any body language that kind of revolves around nervous habits, and also using appropriate facial expressions. We don't want you to look bored. We don't want you to look like you're disinterested. We want you to look engaged. So no eye rolling, no, kind of looking up, when you're presenting, like not even engaging the audience at all, just looking bored or disinterested. You don't want to do that. Or if someone asks a question, that's kind of, don't roll your eyes at that. So again, be very conscious of your body language and use appropriate facial expressions. You want to make sure that right along with that, you exercise restraint with any hand gesturing or fidgeting, no knuckle cracking, no kind of having your, playing with your thumbs, you don't want to do that. I've seen so much. I've seen the pen clicking, the hair twirling. Let's see. I've seen the knuckle cracking, the rocking back and forth as you're presenting. The main thing is the placeholders. Placeholders happen when you're, first of all, nervous, but secondly, when you're rushing. So the the you know, and like, usually the and the are the biggest culprits. If you are a person that uses a lot of placeholders, which means, again, you're nervous and you're rushing, what happens with placeholders is we are talking faster than our brain can process what's going to come out next. So what happens is, instead of a short pause or a dramatic pause, we use or and then we go into what we're going to talk about next. We're just, it's a placeholder to keep from having blank space. Well, honestly, I'd rather have blank space than hear too many placeholders. Are you going to be able to get rid of all of them? No, that's really hard to do. Very, very hard to do. But can you think about what you're going to say and maybe slow down the pace? Yes. And how do you do this? How do you get rid of the placeholders? The easiest way is to really slow down the pace of your speaking. Now, you're going to think, wow, I am speaking really slowly. But in reality, it's a good pace for a presentation. So you're stopping, you're taking a pause, and you're thinking about what you're going to say next. It's really, you're being very conscious of the placeholders. And it's okay to pause for a second. It's not a big deal. It may be in an awkward place, it may be in the middle of a sentence. That's okay, as long as we're minimizing the placeholders. Now, you don't want to slow things down so much to where you're at a turtle pace or a snail's pace speaking. You'd still want it to make sure it's a good pace for presenting, but not conversational. Oftentimes when we're speaking in a conversation, we speak faster. So we're just slowly taking a couple steps back from that. And this is, again, something to practice on your own. You can practice in front of a mirror, you can practice in front of your pet, you can practice in front of, another person. It's just simply practicing slowing down the pace of your presentation. And then, of course, be aware, just be very conscious of those. If you have nervous habits, if there are things that you do when you're presenting, just kind of keep those under control. So I did say I was going to talk about a little bit about the elevator pitch, because this tends to be something professionally that we do is basically you're selling a concept, whether that be a research project, idea, or product. A true elevator pitch is no longer than 20 to 30 seconds, which is really hard because you're having to turn it and burn it. Like you need to hit what you're going to say on all thrusters and be persuasive. And you want people to want to know more is ultimately what the goal is. Giving them enough information for them to be like, I want to know more about this information. So the quick guide for an elevator pitch is you talk about being prepared. To get the information out in 20 to 30 seconds is a tough task. If you're a postdoc and maybe you took part in our postdoc slam last spring, or you've taken part in the 3MT, or you know what the 3MT is for graduate students, that's 3 minutes plus. That's hard enough. That's a challenge. To do an elevator pitch in 20 to 30 seconds, you really have to know your stuff. You have to be a really good presenter, a good oral speaker. You have to learn how to be concise. The talky, too much detail is not going to work. You really need to know how to take your information and consolidate it down to real key points. You need to be able to speak simply and genuinely. You always, in any type of public speaking, if the person or the people listening to you don't trust what you're saying, you're going to lose them. So you always need to speak genuinely when you're speaking to people. Again, part of that, is being vulnerable, giving everybody the information, being transparent with your presentation style and the content. As I mentioned earlier, there's that attention grabber. How are you going to initially engage your audience? How are you going to grab the listener's attention in the first couple seconds of your presentation? Because if you don't catch them in that amount of time, you're not going to really get them for the whole thing. Asking qualifier questions, again, those are like rhetorical questions at the beginning. These are not questions you are looking to be answered because you have 20 to 30 seconds. You're not looking for answers to the questions. In the 3MT, I say you can start off with a qualifier question or a rhetorical question. Often they're, have you thought about blah? And that's how people introduce their topic. They're not asking for a response, but it's a way for someone to think, oh, okay, well now, wow, that kind of really caught my attention. I do want to know more. Tailor your pitch to your audience. We talked about that. You want to tell a consistent story. You don't want to get off topic. You want to, again, focus the information, focus the content, focus on the information that the research or whatever that you're presenting over. And also you can be creative in how you're telling the story. And that takes me to my final thoughts. And then I'll open it up to any questions that you have. Is when you break this all down and you're starting to be a public speaker, you're trying to gain experience, is the one thing that I like to impart to everyone is that you really need to trust yourself, and you need to trust your audience. I think that's a big fear piece, is that you don't have enough confidence, but you really do need to trust yourself. You need to trust yourself that you will do a good job, and you need to have more confidence in yourself. You will do a good job. It's a vicious cycle. People get nervous because they've made mistakes, or they're afraid of making mistakes. And when they do, it makes them more nervous. So that just keeps doing a vicious cycle. Man, when I make a mistake in a presentation, I just own it. Wow, I can't believe I said that, or, well, I didn't mean to say that. Moving on. Usually what you'll get is it reduces the tension, because people know you made a mistake. You forgot something you were going to say. Again, not a big deal. Oh my gosh, what was I going to say next? Well, I'm 50, and that's just what happens. Stuff like that. It's reducing the tension. But if you, again, just even if you take ownership of the mistakes, just you'll make the whole process a lot more enjoyable. Trust yourself and trust the audience. Going back to what I said, one of the biggest takeaways is turning that negative energy into positive energy. Excuse me, I hit my keyboard. See, these things happen. Turn off those negative thoughts in your head. Turn off those negative thoughts that say you're going to mess up. You're going to fail. You shouldn't be giving a speech because you're bad at it. Those things, that's all just noise. None of it is real, because it is a learned skill. Public speaking is a learned skill, which means anyone can learn how to do it. You're not born with it. It's not like having blue or brown eyes. You can learn how to do it. So you need to turn those negative thoughts off, because all it's doing is creating more anxiety for you. You want to tell a great story, whether you are writing or presenting, either of those modalities. You're telling a story. You're telling a story oftentimes from your perspective or the perspective of your research. But either way, however you slice it, you are telling a story, and you want to tell a great story. So be a great storyteller, tell a compelling story. And if you don't remember anything else when you leave here today, is please, 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 when you are up there, when you are in front of a group of people, whether that be 5 or 500, or you're talking in front of a camera, be the truest version of yourself. Who are you? And who you are is how you are going to present. Be able to be vulnerable. Have a conversation with the people listening. And just, if you are the truest version of yourself up there, you're going to be comfortable, you're going to be relaxed, and you're going to have a nice time. So trust yourself in the audience, harness that negative energy, turn off the negative thoughts, tell a story, and while you're telling that story, be the truest version of yourself. And if that's a little boy or a little girl who wanted to be a superhero as a kid, then that is the truest version of yourself. Thanks, everybody. I'm now going to stop the presentation and open it up to questions. Actually, that'll have to be Lily, if you can stop the recording.